bigger space has to. Let me answer the question a different way. Whenever in my history, whenever we take on a project, there's two requirements. I believe that every successful project has to have both a really good IP, a really good story, intellectual property, and a really good distribution mechanism. And I think whenever we look at a client, we require that they come in with one of those two things, because there is no way that we can invent both of them for a project. It's just, I mean, it's just too much work, and I've seen a lot of friends die trying. It's nuts. So those are the two big ones. You know, every client we've worked on, it's great when they come in with both, but that's very rare. But when they come in with one or the other, we can invent the missing one, right? In the case, I mean, you know, I Love Bees was great. They came in with this awesome story. Everyone knows the story of Halo, everyone knows the Master Chief and all that, and we thought, well, what we really need is a distribution mechanism here, because they don't have that at all, and that's where payphones came from. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if you can hit both of those things, and you supply one, the client supplies the other, and you get that really nice synergy working between the two, God, I hate that word, then what happens is it honestly, the audience that comes into the project honestly doesn't matter, because there's very clear rules about how they play the game and what story they're going to get as a reward as they play. And suddenly you've got people who have never met each other before, people who have very different motivations, but they understand the rules of the game, how to play, and what they're going to get in success. So that's the best formula that I've found so far. Okay. Now I have a quick emergency interrupt that's very time sensitive, so 1 second.
Okay. Keep going. Then where I want to take this is, so, you know, you're being tasked to extend our project. Okay, well then you're back on the hot seat then.
It's getting cold.
So
it's a pretty loose use of the word emergency.
Here's what happens is that, you know, it's the first meeting, you know, you have this discussion, okay, we're going to take X project and we're going to extend it into the alternate reality game space. And what do you get? What are you given that teaches you where you can go? You know what I mean? Is that you've been given a piece of IP, and how do you know what you're allowed to do?
What aren't you allowed to do? I think that a lot of clients look at the alternate reality space, marketers in particular, right? That's what we're talking about here. They come to this space because they're looking at an audience that's very jaded. Audiences that don't like to be marketed to, that don't like sitting back, and, you know, who's got TiVos and know how to skip TV commercials and have no influence, are not affected at all by banner ads or anything like that. And so they need a way to create something really, really cool that an audience, instead of something that's going to be pushed at an audience constantly, and you know, everyone in this room has developed a really complex set of blockers to avoid and ignore all of that stuff, right? We're really good at it because we live in a world where we have to get good at that. So these guys want to find a way to reach everyone in this room. And what alternate reality games provide is a way to turn the model, to switch it from push to pull, right? To switch it so that everyone in this room, and everyone you know, hopefully, isn't getting anything pushed to them. Instead, they're pulling it into their own lives. They really, really want to see that TV commercial, and they want to record it, and they want to analyze every frame, and they want to throw each frame into Photoshop. I mean, they want those elements because now there's a connection. I could talk about this forever, and I don't want to take up too much time.
Well, let's see if there's anyone else who wants to jump in on this. Is that so? You've just been given the contract, or you've just decided to work on this project with a partner. What do you get? How do you know what to do?
So, I mean, in my experience, you with your initial pitch, or at least with your initial draft of creative briefs or things like that, you shoot for the moon. You just go with the most outlandish, like, if they let us do this, we'll do it. And I found, by and large, it's not the things you expect them to push back on. It's the stuff you're like, really? That's the thing you don't want us to do? Okay. You know, with
any examples?
Like what?
Yeah, tell us.
I think with Terminator, there was a lot of discussion about ever using the Terminators. but they didn't care if we had people get their heads blown off. We didn't care if we had people swing. They didn't care what the content was. It could be, you know, just ridiculously extreme. But they were like, I don't know about if we can show Terminators legally. And there was sort of a debate about that. We're like, well, it's kind of the premise, so I don't know. And, you know, so we had a lot of negotiation about that. And then eventually, once they got comfortable with that idea, we just kind of just went crazy with it. But in my experience, it's often, if you go really outlandish, you know, a lot of times what you expect them to push back on, they will find it just crazy enough that they think it'll be big, and they'll go with it.
How about the other guys? Do you have, I mean, it's sort of a different relationship. Like Lance, you've sort of brought both elements to the table, and so it's, you know, one unified source. But Yomi, do you have partners that you have to talk to about what you're doing with this project?
Well, my business partners, as I've got two business partners, and I call them the angels. They stop me going a little bit too crazy with my ideas, and one of the key things that keeps coming up is insurance and liability. You know, some of the outlandish stuff. Fortunately, the people who are sponsoring this they're totally up for it. I mean, when we said, okay, here's the budget, and then we want a budget for gold, and once we scaled that one, I knew everything was pretty good. You know, they are very, very accommodating. I mean, for them, the key elements are extending the brand, extending the actual medium in which people can engage with the brand in question, as well as extending the experience of all the respective players. I mean, we've drafted a story that really doesn't exist at all. We have various historic pointers that we can actually use to do that, and as long as somewhere deep down, further on, you know, people stumble across, you know, the little nuggets that we've placed, more or less targeting and pinpointing, you know, the actual game, it works, and they've been extremely accommodating. All the stuff we've created to date has been greenlit.
Right. Well, a luxury.
Yes.
I guess.
They wouldn't let us throw someone out of a plane.
It sounds like there are sort of two different methods of extending a project. If I could just condense it a little, is that, you know, one is working directly in that story world and jumping in, you know, like for instance with some of the Isle of Bees is working in that existing world and playing in that space. And then there's another which is, you know, the sort of what I guess can be called brand loyalty, because we specifically with this project Holomove, you know, very tangentially related to Visual Studio, but you know, it was just that slight connection that gave it the brand loyalty that it needed to extend over. What I wanted to ask about is wanted to dig into some horror stories. And I'm going to wrap up with a couple of those, which I wanted to talk specifically about timing. So you've got a different project that's running on a completely different time schedule than, say, your alternate reality game. And I know Lance has some stories about this, because the idea of coordinating phones with on-screen projections scares the crap out of me. So anyone got any stories of like the most challenging timing issue that came up?
When we did that, I think the biggest issue that we had was really cell coverage in the actual space. That was probably the most difficult thing. And then text messaging is just limited to the service provider when they actually deliver it. But I think that in some ways that's why we're morphing. We're doing this whole like Bluetooth kind of peer-to-peer thing, you know, because we're going to change it up and kind of make it work in that way. But in terms of like horror stories, I think it, you know, you know, without getting into like stalker stories or like weird stuff like that in terms of obsessive fans, no, I don't really have any horror stories.
Anyone else where the timing just didn't work out?
I know Steve Peters later on is going to talk about Vanishing Point, but that one, for me, posed the largest time-intensive, synchronization issue.